about being in alignment with our environment, let's discuss the next step in finding your ideal location through the practice of human design. I want to make it very clear you must know your exact birth time to know the correct environment for you because it's shown through your design arrow colors and tone, which can change within just a few minutes. Color, tone, and base is what I like to call below the chart. What I mean by this is like when you see your chart and let's say you have like gate 19, you will see it as gate 19.1 or 2 or 3 or 4, 5, 6, but it's actually 19.1.4.3.5, which is line, color, tone, and base. And this is a very advanced level of human design. And most programs don't even show you unless you have a pro account, other than just the arrows yourself. Now, for this lesson particularly, I'm going to use this website because this software allows you to have your arrows for free, along with some basic information surrounding your environment. But as someone like myself who's more advanced in the field, I'm going to provide some specific information. The left side of your chart, or the design side, is all about your body. And the two arrows on this side fall under the primary health system. The top arrow is represented by your sun and earth, which is regarding digestion. The bottom arrow represents our environment determined by your nodes, and the circle is for the color. The color in your environment showcases how your body, or as human design likes to call it, your vehicle, resonates to a certain environment and what is correct for you. It's not so much about a specific place, but a type of environment that can be deconstructed in various ways. However, according to human design, being in the right environment is essential for your health, meeting the right people that you are meant to associate with, maybe that be through business, romance, or friendship, and what you are meant to do in this life. One thing to note, though, is that Ra did state that your environment doesn't fully play a role into your life until after your Saturn return, which is usually any time between ages 28 to 30, even though he gives various examples of how this can impact children. But I suppose it was kind of just to focus on only if the child was struggling or unhealthy. If you have color 1 through 3, it refers to hardscapes, which means artificial or man-made landscapes, which is usually within an urban environment, while colors 4, 5, 6 refers to natural landscapes. In addition to that, you're going to see that the colors are actually expressed through evolutionary perspective, no matter where it's expressed, meaning like whether it's in your environment, digestion, your motivation and perspective. In fact, the colors, tone, base, and lines are all expressed in that nature, meaning like 1 is the most primitive in the sense of the primal instinct or basic nature of a human, leading up to 6, which is the level that slightly transcends human nature. As for the tone and the base, they are actually subsets of color, meaning that base influences tone and tone influences color. And there's also variable, which is determined if the arrow is facing left or right. Here on this program, though, it states for some reason that the tone of the lunar nodes do not carry any specific programming for your environment, which is actually not correct. The tone is what determines the specifics of the environment and the direction of the arrows. So tones 1 through 3 faces the arrow to the left, 4, 5, 6 will face the arrow to the right. The direction of the arrow is what determines if you're meant to be active in your environment, which is left, or passive, which is right. To be left in your environment, like I am myself, in fact, I'm all left, which is this ability to really focus in and use a lot of strategic involvement around your environment. But you also see this general theme of being observed because the left creates action through a process that will arise itself out of the environment. And when those lefts create action, they are being observed by others. Lefts are the ones that get a certain amount of attention and create change within their environment. They are supposed to make an impact or influence their environment in some way. If you're right, you're meant to be an observer. You're meant to take in your surrounding and absorb information without actively seeking to influence or change it. You're meant to be still and allow things to come to you rather than pushing or forcing events to happen. Just by being present in your environment, you help others by having this calming and grounding effect. Rights often find themselves in the right place at the right time when they allow those natural circumstances to unfold. Color 1 is caves. Now this first color, your cave or home is where you feel most secure, especially when the home only has one exit point. Because if you think about a cave, it has the same entry and exit that can be seen at all times. So the concept is really being able to control your environment for security and safety. And this is the most important aspect for anywhere you see a 1. I mean, not even just in the color, but also in the line. They need a sense of security. It's feeling safe within your environment. And most people that have caves tend to work from home or would prefer to. Or if you have to actually go somewhere for your work, you want it to be an office where you can close the door, which means you wouldn't do well in like a cubicle setting or an open space. This is also why cave people don't usually spend a lot of time in crowded group environments. Of course, I understand it's very rare when a home only has one entry and exit, unless you live in something like an apartment, because most apartments only have a front door unless you have a patio or something. And of course, if you have more than one exit point, though, in your home, most likely that other exit point is always locked or at a place where you know that no one's going to get to very easily. And one thing that I found fascinating is that Ra talked about how people with the caves environment tend to have their favorite place be their car. Because if you think about it, like that's going to be a very secure place. When you get in, you can now automatically lock the doors and you can see who's in the back seat. And you're the one that allows people to come in and out, especially if you're the driver. And I find it funny because I do have a friend that has caves for his environment. And he was talking to us about this fact that he loves eating breakfast, especially McDonald's breakfast, in his car every morning in front of a gym. Of course, he was sharing this about as kind of an ironic joke, but another friend had asked, like, don't you want to just go out and sit on the bench then? And he's like, nope, I just like sit in my car. And I'm like, that is the perfect example of somebody with a cave. Depending on the tone, you're either going to have selective or blending. Selective means that you have a left arrow and tones 1 through 3. If you have blending, that means you're going to be a right arrow and tones 4 through 6. Selective is focusing in on your security of your environment, which means you're going to be very, very specific about who you allow in your cave. You probably don't really care to have a roommate, or if you do, you're going to do like a full background check and you're going to be very particular. You may also be very sensitive to environments when you go to someone else's home. As for blending, it means you want to blend in your social environment within your own cave. You're more open to who you allow in your home. You may be the one that's like, hey, oh, you want to have a wedding? Why don't you have it at my place? Blending is the host of the dinner party, while selective is the one of the guests that spends their time only talking one-on-one to each person. Also for selective, you may prefer to live in the suburbs, or you do a lot of research on which the best neighborhood or the safest neighborhood is. While the blending will probably prefer to be in the center or the epicenter of some kind of community or social area. Color 2 is markets, and 2 is all about being available and having selection. And this is the cave people evolving to move out of the caves and being exposed to an open environment. It is an environment that has a lot of options, and there has to be selection in everything, whether it be the people, where you want to buy your food, what you want to do today, where you want to walk. Now, keep in mind, all the colors are going to relate to the lines as well. So a line 2 is somebody that is meant to be called. They have this kind of natural ability that usually gets pulled out by somebody else recognizing it. So when you have a second line or a color 2, if it's someone that's not in the not self, when they get that call to answer who is right for them, they're not going to know that it's actually the right one and lose out on the opportunities. But when a line 2 is aware of its natural abilities and that surrounding, aware of its talents and pays attention and is in the true self or in line with their energy, they're going to receive a gift. And this gift is going to be this gift of discernment. And they're also going to receive the gift of the right people, the right places, and everything falling into place for them naturally, because the line 2s are also considered the naturalists, even though they're called the hermit. But what matters to the environment for a color 2 is that it holds variation and also a place where people can be found, because then they have a better chance of finding the right person and who they're supposed to be with, because they're supposed to be very selective about who they're surrounding themselves around, because they have all these options. They're meant to be very particular, and they're allowed to be a little picky, because they might be somebody that dates like 100 people, then all of a sudden they just find that right one person. Or they might be somebody that has to look at like 100 different places before they choose the right one, because they might want something very particular in what they're looking for. Markets are particularly connected to the city living, and it's somebody that tends to live in the city area or very close to it, because that's where you're going to find the most selection. They don't really do well in rural areas. They need that hustle and bustle. They need those options. Now, if you're internal or left, you most likely will live in a high rise or some kind of apartment in the middle of some epic center of diversity. You might prefer to live above a business, like, those high rises in cities usually have some kind of business or retail space below them. When it's external or right arrow, this would be someone that's more adept to suburbs and out kind of like on the outskirts of the business center, but you're still able to get to it very easily, or you're accessible. Like you can get your groceries delivered by whoever you want, because you can still shop online. Now, someone who's a really good example of this that I know, unfortunately, is A, who I've spoken about in my previous videos, but he has markets internal, and he's a great example of this because he lives smack dab downtown in a high rise, like on the top floor where there's businesses below it. And when I had met him, and he had said he had gone on a lot of dates. And what was interesting is I said we had a 0.0007% chance of meeting, right? So he would never have met me if he lived anywhere else, or if he was in a rural area, definitely not. So because he wouldn't meet that many people. And as explained to me, that he is very picky of what he wanted. I mean, so am I, but he was very particular in it. And of course, the moment that he did somehow shift in alignment is the moment that he got rid of that. So just like kind of emphasizing my point in my previous videos where I said, like, there's not a lot of chances a color 2 will get. So when you get something called to you and it's the right thing and you choose to ignore that, or you don't recognize that and you end up losing it, the chances of you getting again is very, very slim. But of course, that's his own journey to learn. So let's get to color 3, which is my color and my environment, kitchens. And there's something to know about the color 3 is that when it comes to a line 3, It's all about trial and error. Like you may not end up in the right environment of where you're supposed to be. It might take a couple places for you to actually get there, especially if with having this color 3, if you are a line 3 as well. I mean, I'm a 3-6, which for my first 30 years of my life, I was a 3-3, and now I'm a color 3 in my environment. So I'm very impacted by 3s. And when you have a color 3, there's this potential of discovery. Ross stated, like, if you went back, a couple 100,000 years ago, all the 3s are going to be hanging out around the fire because that's where things are happening. Things where things were changing. It's where we learn, like, oh, we could cook our food and we become smarter. Great. And that's what kitchens is all about. Kitchens is industry and manufacturing. It's an environment of creation and creativity of where transformation is taking place. I mean, when you speak of a literal kitchen, it's not like people go and sleep in a kitchen. It's where something's cooking. So kitchens could be you working in a hospital or even a research lab. It could be literally within your own house, creating things in the kitchen. I mean, I'm doing this video right now and I'm in my kitchen basically. And for myself, I've always ended up in cities like without even realizing it. I tend to migrate to the fastest growing cities in the United States. Like when I moved to Seattle, it was just starting to grow because Amazon had just like opened up their headquarters there. And then when I moved to Denver, I found out that was the fastest growing city, which is why one of the reasons why I had to leave, because it got so expensive the 4 years I was there. And now living in Raleigh has just been announced last year, like this is one of the fastest growing cities in the US. But Raleigh is also this hub for research and innovation with the Research Triangle Park. And I particularly looked for that. I want to do genetic research, and which is either in California, which I knew I didn't want to go to, New York or Raleigh. So this is where I chose. I mean, I could have gone to Boston, which is another big area for it, but I'll explain why I didn't go there when it comes to my astrocartography. But either way, what's really important is that even if you have a right or a left arrow in kitchens, in color 3, you're looking at this mutative stage. So you can still be very active within your environment. Kitchens is all about creating change and making an impact and changing your environment. You're meant to change the world. You kind of have this ability to create change. Now, as for wet or dry, this literally means like climate and landscape. So wet is humid, green spaces, sources of water. Dry is not humid and has more of a barren landscape like the desert. Now, I'm kitchen's wet, and ironically, I've lived in a lot of drier places, but whenever I'm in a dry environment, I also tend to get sick more, and my skin like literally hates it. In addition to that, I said I'm a quad left, meaning all my arrows are to the left. And I have usually made a very big impact for all the cities I've gone to, except for Denver. Because when I lived in Vegas, I became very well known within the city. I was a little bit of a socialite, as well as when I lived in Seattle, I had a magazine and I created a lot of change. Now, as for Denver, I did not make much of an impact because that was during the time for my Uranus opposition. So I actually went from kitchens to valleys wide. And I don't want to make this too complicated for you, but it has to do with transits and your life cycles. Going from kitchens to valley wide is completely different. I mean, there is a still sense of community and communication, but it's not about making an impact so much. It's about being in your environment and having these wide open spaces of energy flowing, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But it doesn't mean like you have to go someplace in a different environment during your time. It's just how it worked out for me. And it's just kind of like I shows case on like how I subconsciously live my design through my environment without consciously knowing it. So as for these higher numbers, we're talking about natural landscapes or the overall area instead of the actual home itself. Color 4 is mountains. And this is technically a foundational color like line 1, but for the higher trigram. So they too need a sense of security, but in a way they need to be able to see everything in their surrounding. A view from the top of a mountain. So mountain environments are ones that are up high, offering this broad perspective. This visual control helps them feel in charge and at peace, especially when their environment has whatever it is they need. Like they're the type of people that are going to stock up on essentials. Like Costco is going to be your favorite spot and pick out everything and throw it in storage, ensuring that you have everything you need in case something happens where you're stranded up on the mountain. People with mountains tend to thrive in elevated places, both physically and often doing better at higher altitudes, and actually might prefer living in elevated areas, and also metaphorically by being the ones that often take the higher road when it comes to disagreements or situations. And due to this elevated perspective, they can also be seen as natural leaders or guides and provides insight and directions to others within their environment. Theory kind of goes around too that the peoples at mountains actually don't need as much oxygen. Rod said, like, if anybody's gonna smoke in their environment, mountains is the only one that should. Not that he was encouraging smoking and not that I am either, but it's just saying that you don't need as much oxygen as a normal person. I do not know if that's exactly true. For your health, please always do what your doctors say first. People with mountains can also be drawn to want to have this like psychedelic experience or like ayahuasca or taking mushrooms, because These experiences also reduce the oxygen in their brain. And mountain people also have this natural resilience or adaptability for challenging situations, usually within their environment. I mean, after all, not everyone can scale a mountain, right? They gain clarity and insight by being above the hustle and bustle in everyday life. They also don't like really to be in crowded environments because they prefer more controlled social interactions because it's about quality over quantity. They will seek solitude, not just for comfort, but also because needed for mental clarity and focus. Now, if you are somebody that does not live in a high elevated area or not up in a mountain, I'm not saying you have to live in a literal mountain, but the point is that you should always aim for the highest point available within your surrounding area. That could even be the top floor of an apartment building. Or if you're experiencing issues at lower elevations, maybe it might be beneficial for you to take some kind of mountainous retreat to see if that helps improve your condition. Now, if you're active, you need to come down from your vantage point every now and then and engage with your community. You have to have that balance of solitude with active participant and social interactions. If you're passive or right, you tend to remain more isolated and preferring to observe from this elevated position and letting people come to you rather than seeking out interaction. Color 5, valleys, was initially described like in the earlier years of human design as the opposite of mountains. Valleys are environments that are close to the ground and it's somebody that needs a higher level of oxygen. It's advised for those in this environment to never smoke because it will make a huge impact on their lungs. It is characterized by these open spaces and the flow of energy of some sort, whether that be through water or traffic. It can be like literal valleys, wide fields, or these large open spaces within an urban setting. Now, as human design grew, Ross spoke of valleys as also being this environment that supports sound, social interaction, and community engagement, ensuring that they communicate and connect easily to somebody. A key feature of valleys is this flow of energy, which, like I said, is represented by water or traffic. There has to be a constant flow behind or near them that supports their environment. It's because the acoustic properties of valleys allows sound to carry, symbolizing the importance of communication for people within their environment. Think of it, that iconic scene like The Hills Are Alive with the sound of music, where the character is just galloping through the fields. Now, people in valleys tend to engage in gossip as well, which is actually seen positively as it facilitates communication and connection. Also, people with valleys tend to be more adaptable because they have the way of creating flow and also going with the flow. If you have wide valleys, these are usually large, wide open spaces. Like I mentioned, like I was valleys wide when I lived in Denver. I lived on 33 acres. There's this wide open space, and then I have a gulch behind it that water used to flow through. So valleys wide usually have like a wide river or a lake or a highway freeway of some sort that has a broad flow of energy and sound. Narrow valleys, on the other hand, are more smaller confined spaces like alleyways, small streams, or narrow passages. The flow of energy and sound is more concentrated, like as an apartment is, with an alleyway behind it. If you are unable to live in an area like that, just ensure that your living space at least has some good airflow and open communication lines, whether that be within the physical environment, like an open space, like open floor plan, or engaging yourself in the community. Utilize like fountains, or get a like a little water machine or something for your home, because that will allow the flow of energy to go through. If you're someone that experiences a lot of health issues in your area and you're at a higher elevation, try visiting some lower elevation places to see if that improves your health, and then you'll know if that's where you're meant to be. Now, the last color here is shores, and this represents boundaries and being separate from the environment. This environment emphasizes the importance of having very clear boundaries and being able to see what's happening around you and know what's coming into your environment. And this is because as a line 6, it means like you're separate from the rest. There's always some kind of separateness from a line 6. Color 6, tone 6, base 6, does not matter. It's always about a little bit different than the 1 through 5s, because shores encourages opening up perspectives to a broader horizon. It's about being available within your boundary to influence those around you, because again, line 6s are also the role model or the guru, and people that have shores as their environment naturally attract people to them. And when they embody them true selves or become that role model, others are drawn to them without any effort. Shores people tend to have fewer social restrictions too, and they are known to know a lot of different types of people. They aren't restricted to a specific social circle and like to interact with diverse groups, but they also need a balance between solitude and social interactions, because they thrive in environments where they can retreat within their boundaries, but also engage when needed. And the concept of boundaries doesn't just mean like within their environment. It also extends to the psychological and emotional boundaries as well. Maintaining clear boundaries helps them manage their energy and interactions within their environment. Shores also supports a natural flow of energy, similar to how the tides move along the shore. And this can also translate this need for an environment to feel dynamic and alive. So when you have shores as your environment, you may gravitate toward living at the edges of areas, such as the edge of a park or a cul-de-sac, and you may prefer where there's like some kind of clear boundary line. And your home can also be in this way where it has that openness, but also has defined edges as well. Those that have natural shores are places like natural boundaries, like beaches or areas next to water. People with like naturals and shores in their environment often feel a strong connection to water And this is evident in the readings that I've done. I have quite a few people that have shores, and they feel so much better when they're close to water. And they always have this desire to kind of head to the beach or go towards the coast. Artificial shores are these man-made boundaries, like on the edge of a park or a boundary between different types of environments, such as a residential area next to a commercial one. If you have health issues, like spending time near water or environments with these clear boundaries might help improve that. And even if you don't live near a place with water, visiting places like that can even help you feel more aligned and at ease.